Are you guys ready to start? Is that okay? Okay,
Sure.
whenever you're ready,
Mine
Mr.
is
Foster.
9:01 actually, yeah, the time is 9 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. First on the agenda, we have the balance scorecard, and we schedule out.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the update to the balance scorecard. You might remember that this is how we monitor, or one of the ways that we monitor our continuous school improvement plan as a district, MSIP 6, what we submitted to the state, and what we are currently monitoring through On Strategy as well. And so I'll get into that a little bit later. The nice thing about this balance scorecard is that we were finally able to update it with the most current state assessment scores. So if you turn the page, and the second page that you have there is our comparison set. And so that comparison set is what we use to develop these boxes on the scorecard. And I think I mentioned that to you when we explained the beginning of the year scorecard. When it comes to the academic services piece of the balanced scorecard. That way we are looking at districts like ourselves, some that are a little, that are really like us, some that are less like us, and some that we want to be more like. And so it kind of gives you a whole range of school districts to look at, from North Kansas City to Columbia to Springfield to Cape Girardeau, Joplin. Independence is basically has our fingerprint. They are very similar to us. Raytown, and then less like us are Kansas City Public and Ferguson. They have the same socioeconomic challenges, but they have a different demographic. Whereas Independence has similar socioeconomic challenges and has a similar demographic to us. So just to point that out, that North Kansas City, Springfield, they're big. They're a lot bigger than us, but they have a lot of the same socioeconomic challenges, but not at the level that we do. They're at 54%, free and reduced lunch, while we're sitting at 70%. And so we don't have school districts like Liberty or Park Hill, those types of districts in this Blue Springs, unless we do have Blue Springs, I don't think we do, in this mix, because they're sitting at something like 18-20% free and reduced lunch, and a very different demographic than we are sitting at. So but at the same time, I would point out that their proficiencies don't exceed somewhere around 60%. So we have to keep that in mind too, because when folks look at data like this and they see these percentages, they immediately go to, 100% is an A and 90% and down is, this and that. So I just want you to keep in mind those districts that we often talk about, they're going to have proficiencies around 60%, whereas we are around 40% in a lot of instances with ELA. Okay, so that explains that. If you turn there is a second page. This is what we call our subgroups. Okay, what DESE is called subgroups, they now call it student groups. It's not subgroups, so it really is students that it includes our ethnicity, it includes free and reduced lunch, it includes students that have an IEP, they might have a 504 plan. All of those students, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education bundles into one big group. And so when you look at our comparisons through that lens, which, if we're 70% free and reduced lunch, the majority of our kids are right here. Whereas this is all of our kids. So when you look at how we compete with other school districts in that lens, you can see that that's kind of a different data set, if you will. And we'll talk more about that. So we do well in that comparative analysis. Okay, so what we're going to do is start at the top, and we'll go through all 43 items. And I just want to reiterate that our goal for 2023 was 176 points. Last year we ended at 165, and right now we look to be at about a 182. So that means that we've exceeded right now our mark, but these aren't final numbers. So keep in mind as we go through this, we're only in January. We've got half the race left to go. So please keep that in mind. So if you look at responsible with taxpayer dollars, that was from our community survey, and that was at 38.7%. Before the pandemic, when we looked at that number, it was right around 44%. So that number, again, from this survey had dropped a little bit. Dr. Edgar and I talked about it. It's part of the finance department's improvement plan is to develop some infographics, like when Dr. Edgar was in charge of that department, that really made it clear about how the expenditures and where they were going. So I think that will help improve that. The expenditure to budget index, Katie and Jenny put this together, and it's just letting them know where they need to be with, and I couldn't explain it to you, I'm sure Dr. Edgar could, but all the different funds that we have and how those are all, where they all sit for this time of the year. And so the metrics that they have set out is 32 is the target. So right now they're at a 30. So they feel confident that things are going well from that aspect. And then when you look at our academic achievement, we are going to look first at line 3. That is our Com Arts iReady proficiency, or ELA, however you prefer to look at that, reading. Right now, if time were to stop, we are predicted to be at 41% proficiency in Com Arts at the end of the year if all students make their typical growth. And that if is capital I, capital F. So just keep that in mind, that is a prediction. So if we had a crystal ball and said, if this happens, this is where we predict you'll be. So again, this is mid-year. Our goal is 42% this year because we have a 5% improvement goal. So that is we were pleased with that metric, but at the same time, there is an if attached to that particular metric. ComArts growth, right now, that number should be 50, and we're at a 67. So that was a good sign for us in terms of our growth, because growth is what's going to drive that proficiency change. In other words, kids will move from below basic to basic, that's a proficiency, but the growth is what drives them over the line to a different proficiency. If you look at line 5, this is our student group. So we look at how our groups are doing, and those are gaps that we're really looking at. So we feel like when we look at the gap that other school districts have between all of their kids and their student groups, we're performing pretty well in that particular category. In other words, in other school districts, there's a bigger gap than what we have. The line number 6, we are working with TMC to fix some functionality in iReady. It's a long story. But right now we don't have that metric, but we're working with Jake and Jerry and a few other folks so that you guys can have that particular metric. And then if you go down to line 7, again, in math, we have a gap that's in a moderate range. So we are going to continue to try to close that gap the group gap in ComArts. There is a little bit where we would like it to move closer. So then if you go to reading level 3rd grade average scale score, okay, you'll see that that's all the way back in the red at a 511. So 511 indicates, what that tells us, if you look at the scale score, a 511 is where a kid is early on grade level in 3rd grade reading. So we've moved from being at a 2nd grade level, the 478, which makes sense. A third grader comes in at the beginning of the year, they're not a third grader, right? So they've moved to a 500, so they're very close to being early on grade level, and it's in the middle of the year. So I would say that we will continue, if we continue to see that kind of jump, then our average scale score for a third grader will be on that reading level. So that is not a metric that concerns me, even though it's all the way over in the red, because it's middle of the year, if that makes sense. And then if you go down to, we're going to start with math. So again, right now, that 29, what that is a prediction. So again, it comes with a big capital I, capital F. If students make their typical growth, we would be predicted in iReady to be at a 29%. Our goal is 36%. So that is something that we'll continue to monitor. And I would also say that with iReady, the predictions in ELA are tighter than they are in math. In math, they tend to predict lower, which I don't mind, because what it is iReady is pretty rigorous in math. So the kids are in a kind of in a more rigorous situation than they may even see on the math test. So that usually works to our advantage. It's like having a tougher workout than what's expected to you in performance. So I'm still hopeful that we could hit that 36% proficiency. The math growth is not as strong as what we saw in Com Arts. Is it a 53? It should be no less than 50, so it's still above 50 at 53, but it's not strong. It's not as strong as we would like to see it, because if we have kids sitting at 3+ grade levels below in math and a lot of learning loss that we're still trying to make up for in the pandemic, although in our district we held pretty steady through the pandemic, we've got to show more growth than that if we want to move the needle on proficiency. And so that is something that we are continuing to look at and having discussions about how might we move kids faster. We are not in a district where we can just do 1 year value added in the classroom. We've got to do more. And so, and our teachers do that work, but it is difficult to achieve those different proficiencies. So then if you look at line number 11, the student group math ready proficiency, that's at a 21%. And so when you look at our comparison set, we're still, and I know that the 21 seems like that is very low, but when you look at our comparative districts, we are outperforming them when it comes to our student groups and how they are performing in terms of proficiency. So then if you move down to line 13, the gap that we see between all of our kids and the kids that are in those groups that I mentioned, when you look at our comparison set, we're not quite where we want to be, so we're going to continue to try to move that needle. You can see it jumps from 12.8 and then it goes down to 4.3. So that's a pretty big jump, and so we'll continue to be looking at that metric. Then if you look at line item 14, so this is the average scale score of our 7th grade students in math. So you can see that we're way over in the red, and we jumped 7 points. And so this line here tells us where students need to be. Again, they came in as 6th graders. But yet they're not jumping as fast as you saw their reading jump. And so that to get to 489, they still have, I mean, that's not a big jump, but at the same time, that's barely early on grade 7th grade reading. And so that's not where we want those kids to be, because we need them solidly as on grade level in 7th grade if they're going to score advanced or proficient on the math test. So that's something that we are definitely looking at, and it's definitely something that we're continuing to talk about, because again, we have to accelerate that learning for them to get where they need to be by the end of the year.
Is there any recognizable reason?
That
It's
you
across
know,
the board, or is it just dependent on?
it really is coming down to the growth is not happening at the rate that we need it to. And I think Stacia would tell you that and I would agree with her if she said it, would be that the growth is the most sensitive metric we have on the quality of the instruction. And so that's a component, but there's lots of variables that, I mean, I wish that, you know, with schools and systems, we could identify and isolate one variable at a time. But we all know if you have really good instruction, you're gonna see growth happen at a faster rate. And that they're teaching to the standards.
And Ms. Miller, we have some new teachers at that 7th grade level, and so we have circled around some supports through our curriculum advisors. And so there's some targeted practices and work that's happening in the classroom there as well.
So when you say new, they're new to teaching altogether, or to that grade level?
Some are, yes. So
That makes a huge difference. If you're used to teaching first or second grade and you're put in seventh,
right.
boy, that's a head change.
Right. Or you just come out of college or the university and then you're placed in the classroom for the first time. So that's why it's so important our curriculum advisor team circles around supports there to not only support that teacher, but also to impact student learning. So.
And our data will really show, I mean, right to Stacia's point, is that when we have a curriculum advisor stationed in a school dedicated to one school, working with teachers and developing those relationships, we see much higher growth. As opposed to having them trying to cover several different schools. The data shows that most positively. And then the science proficiency, again, this has to do with our comparative data set. Definitely not where we need to be with science. That is something that we talked about this morning. There's a curriculum rewrite that's going to be happening.
Yes.
And so that's going to become a focus. The student group proficiency, again, you can see that that's lower than we are in ELA and math. And the gap, however, is, you know, less than we're seeing in other school districts. Social studies, we're at a 38.1%. That is an area we really declined in from spring 21 to spring 22. So we're having, you know, a definite focus on that. We're still competitive with our comparative school districts, but on the other hand, we would have been much further on, you know, on this scale to the positive had we maintained that proficiency. And then the group percent proficient, we're kind of right there where we tend to be, where our student groups are performing at a very competitive rate to our other comparative school districts. And then if you look at we're going to jump on down to the graduation rate, 4-year graduation rate. Compared to the other districts from 2021, we are not quite to that 80.8, so we have to place ourselves on the 72.9. So we're not performing well compared to the other districts with graduation rate. And I think that's been something that's certainly been a topic of discussion.
The graduation rate, what was it the last couple of years?
During the pandemic, we did see it decline. I think it went down to as low as 76%, but prior to that, it was in the 80s. So we just have to continue to try to move the needle on improving that graduation rate. All school districts did see an impact on graduation rate from the pandemic. We particularly did.
And one building, right? I mean, Lafayette was really bad last year, wasn't it? Like 64 or something.
63%.
Ooh.
So,
But
Yeah.
this is a 4-year average, is that what
yeah,
this
this is the kids that started as ninth graders and ended as 12th graders. So, but we do have a 5-year, a 6-year, and a 7-year. And so on our annual performance report that we expect from DESE sometime in the next century, we get credit for the one that's the highest. So those are kids that may not have graduated with their cohort, but they come back in and then they graduate. So we won't get hit for our graduation rate if those stay higher, but at the same time, we want to improve this.
What about the previous 4 years? Are we staying the same or?
No, we have declined in graduation rate. One of the things that, well, and I can go into this or not, but one of the things that we saw the decline was when there were additional requirements added to graduation. And so, and I think that was 2017 perhaps. But what we did see as a function of that was we saw our college and career readiness improve, but that kind of deselected some of the kids that didn't get on board with that. So the bar was higher, and so then we saw the graduation rate go down. So you're kind of caught between to use a technical phrase, between the fire plug and the dog on that particular thing, where you improve over here, you raise the bar, over here, but then you lose over here.
So it was kind of their career readiness
Sorry, I've never
was,
heard that before.
their graduation was contingent upon them being career ready.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so we saw an improvement in that metric, which helped us with our accreditation, but then we saw some kids that might have otherwise graduated, didn't graduate. But the goal, as I recall at the time, was to make that piece of paper worth more.
Yeah. So since then, have we restructured anything, or are we still doing it the same way?
Well, and Lara can speak to this. I know she's been focused on this, but through the pandemic, we're kind of restructuring, having come through the pandemic with kids that don't have enough credits to even begin to think about graduating and not enough off-ramps to help them get graduated. So that's what Dr. Gilpin has been working on. So it really is a restructuring based on the scrambling from the pandemic,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Is that?
Right, and that's what the Graduate Academy was intended for. And we're going to push that back into the buildings and hopefully support Missouri Options through, they'll graduate, but also more of a personalized plan for them for post-graduation to work, because they're full students still, full-time student, and so some opportunities outside after they do the work within for the Missouri Options throughout for the high school. It's our goal.
This is one that jumps out to me because
Yeah.
graduation rate should be, I feel like that should be in big bold print.
Yeah.
In Illinois and East St. Louis, the kids would rather sell drugs because they earned more money than any job they saw in their future. And that's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't care about the consequences because most of them didn't make it out of high school.
Yeah.
So that's just troublesome because they seek other alternatives if they don't feel like they can make it in the classroom.
Yeah, a lot of, we've talked to the business community about that. They're seeing a lot of those students just come and get low-paying jobs instead of stay the course. So again, it's a re-engineering of having gone through the pandemic where kids are a lot of times having to work to support their families. So it's just, or stay home and watch their brothers or sisters. So it's just kind of trying to re-engineer our way back to at least stable state and then continue to improve from there. But we really did see a big impact in graduation rate.
Was there any idea why Lafayette struggled the most?
I will tell you, we had a very rough freshman cohort my last year there, and not a super strong sophomore cohort, and some of those, I think some of those will drop as well. My thing is, I think we have to get those kids linked up to a career path. I think that's key. And that's why at the alternative school, we are hoping to, Blair and I actually met with Christy Arthur from the chamber last Friday to tap into some business partners and have kids do job shadowing, so that we can really try and help them have a career. And I think if they can see the potential that they could have in a place like Caltech or BI or Gray, and that they could do that and make great money, and it helps our workforce, I think we have to do a better job of
Yeah.
connecting with kids on their careers.
Absolutely, and
Yeah,
it becomes more individualized, and
It
I
does.
met with Jill and Chris this morning, just about that very thing. It's that we can't wait until these people are juniors in high school to
Yep.
allow them to go to Hilliard. And so I talked to them, and I guess you two don't even know about this. We're gonna have a meeting next week about this, about putting in some sophomore cohorts, or maybe a freshman cohort and a sophomore cohort, just for that. And it's not necessarily building trades, not necessarily auto mechanics, not necessarily welding, but just kind of an overall curriculum. There's curriculum out there, and then we have time in the day at Hilliard where there's not a whole lot going on between 10 and 11:30. Why not allow those kids to go out there 2 days a week? And so a lot of those things are just finding something for that student to buy into, right? Because if they're not buying into science and math, so we have to do more of that. So we can help ourselves out a little bit. And so there's a lot of things that we're talking about, especially on the alternative front.
So are there some testings like the ASVAB that kind of gets an idea of where your gifts are or your desires are? Is there something that we can do
Yes,
at
and
that
we're
early
actually
level? that-
headed to talk about that here just next. So this is a perfect segue, because if you look, and I'll start by talking about ACT, and then, because you're talking about testing and how that helps kids in terms of informing their next steps, is what
Yeah, just
exactly
kind of
what you're
getting a
talking
feel,
about.
I'm gifted for this, but I
Right.
hate science and.
Right, so our ACT composite average, which helps some of our kids figure out what they're gonna do. Right now, that's at a 20.1. So the next, you can see the next score was a 20.4. So we didn't quite make that mark, so we had to place ourselves on 19.6. Last year, we were 21.2. And this spring of 2022 was the first time that we saw a decline in ACT for 4 years. So that's something that we got to keep an eye on, because we're very competitive typically with our ACT scores. Then this is what gets into exactly what you were talking about, was on line 23 and 24 and then 25. That's how we are monitored by the state for college and career readiness. So one of those items is that all of our seniors will have taken either an ASVAB, a work keys, or an ACT, so that they can utilize that information to inform their next steps. So if they're gonna go to the military, the ASVAB. If they're more suited, like Dr. Edgar mentioned, like Dr. McGinnis mentioned, more suited for potentially a technical career, then the work keys is a great one for them to take, so that they can better understand what skills are necessary in the workforce. So work keys is an ACT product. It works a lot like the ACT. It just lets them know what those skills are that they need in the workplace.
I was thinking though, before they hit that
They-
senior year.
Oh, yes.
They do in the 8th grade?
They do a career clusters and cluster, and then they do start an ICAP. So it's kind of projecting choice, but unfortunately, I think when they move into the high school, our tracks are pretty
But-
limited.
Yeah.
Okay.
But these kids are taking these tests way before just being seniors. The
Right.
state rule is they must have one by their 12th grade year. But if you look at even our ACT data right now, we've got ninth graders taking the ACT, our work keys data, and we've got younger kids taking
A little
it,
bit.
and ASVAB. So they're still taking those tests, but these numbers reflect solely our seniors. But our data would reflect that they are taking these before. And we used to do like the Explore test and things like that in 8th grade. The issue is always taking the time to take the assessment. It's not valuable unless you're using the data to inform something else, and that wasn't happening. So that would be the key, would be to ensure that if our 8th graders were taking, like the, even the pre-ACT would give you some insights. But again, it would have to inform then that ICAP, and that has to also inform their plan towards Hilliard. And that's a metric MSIP 6 is looking at us through the lens of, they've picked up on that might be a good metric to be looking at.
I think part of that, though, when we do that, moving into the high school, we've eliminated so many elective offerings due to numbers and staffing, and so
Yes.
truly, it's not, even though they are supposed to revisit the AgCap and do their planning, these are the only courses we offer. So an example like at Benton, we don't offer
You can't hit it
engineering.
all.
We don't offer any more PLTW engineering at that site, which then kind of lends itself to not the path for those kids that are in that direction.
Which
There's a
kind
variety.
of comes along with that job shadowing,
Yeah.
if it cannot be offered through something like that.
So, and I think we've also landed for some years that we're such a traditional practice in our comprehensive schools, and so I think that's what we're working towards, is more of a personalized plan for those that, because really what, we have 37.6% from the Benton and Lafayette area that go even to 4-year or 2-year. And Central's a little like 52, I think, and so we've always kind of catered to that direction of the college track, I guess, in our thinking, and we have to look differently, I think, as far as not a traditional path anymore.
Especially when
For
they
us,
come
which is
so
we're
much
working towards.
different.
Yeah.
And you know, one thing that you had mentioned in regards to the ASVAB, that's one thing that has always been kind of bizarre to me, is the connection between us and the military base that we have right here. And so I reached out to Dr. Wheeler at Knob Nostr, because I know Knob Nostr is doing a lot of things to tie their school district to the military base. I have lunch with him next Thursday. We have to utilize that resource better.
Yes.
I mean, I don't even know anybody out there, to be honest with you. I've never had a conversation with anybody. And you talk about the number of students that are graduating and going to college. Well, where are the other 68%? You turn on the news every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and they talk about the underutilization of our military in the United States. Why are we not educating these kids? I'm not saying force kids to go to the military. I'm saying that they don't know what the opportunity is. We probably have one recruiter that comes in and he tries to
They come in
go
quite a
around.
bit though at the high school level.
Huh?
They come in quite a bit at the high school level.
But I just don't know why, you know, let's take a field trip. I mean, that place is awesome, you know, when you go out there and look at that stuff. I don't think the kids know. I mean, the only thing they know is some recruiter coming in and telling them this is what you can do and I can give you $50,000 or $100,000 or whatever it may be. But, I mean, we have Jason Horn, we have Colonel Cluck. I mean, those guys will work with us. And why are we, so I'm gonna go to lunch with Jared next week and say, hey, where do I need to start? Tell me what I'm doing, because their connection, actually, Knob Nostr School District is benefiting from their connection with their military base.
So I would add to that and say, I think that's a great idea. Can we do that in every industry that the kids fit into, you know?
Well, I think that's what we're doing with Hilliard, for sure.
Well, once the assessment is done, if we don't have the classes or elected classes, or we don't offer it at Hilliard or somewhere else, maybe somebody in the community we can bridge that gap with.
Yeah.
You know?
It's all about becoming more individualized. That's what we have to be.
Yeah.
We've had these conversations. We started these conversations in Washington DC whenever we went out there. It's just hard to break that mold, man. It's hard to, everything is so traditional. But you know what? If it's not working when it's traditional, let's go non-traditional and let's blow this thing up.
The military does offer a huge range of training.
Oh, absolutely.
That
There's
we just
welders,
don't take
I mean, it's not
advantage
HVAC techs,
Yeah.
it's a lot of that stuff that, and nobody knows that.
Right, they just think it's here, have a gun and go.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like, I'm just thinking outside of the box, and throwing things out there, but You know, it'd be nice to see, like, if we had these kids go through these tests, each category broken down, kind of like what we're looking at here in different colors. So you fit into the blue zone, and you fit into the yellow zone, so they know kind of where they're at. And then we can figure out what to do with them. But if we wait, it's gonna be a lot more kids that slip through the cracks, at this point. You know? Slightly passionate about that subject.
No, but,
Right.
because it's disappointing if you're a C student and you're gonna be C and all they offer you is college, or even Hilliard. It may be, you know, there may be something else. But- So I think getting that material and doing with it what it's supposed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
is
Well, the
good.
definition of productive citizen is so much different today than it was yesterday.
True.
Definitely different than what it was in 1995. So I think that's the problem, that we're thinking, we don't understand the definition of a productive citizen.
You know?
We have to reinvent that, you know. It's our time to make a definition for what that is.
I think in high school, every
I
student
like
should
that,
have at
yeah.
least one idea of what they want to do, because some kids will tell, most kids might tell you they don't know.
A lot of them do say that.
But, you know, that career guidance of 9th, 10th, 11th grade, they could at least have an idea of at least one thing that they want to do, you know? And I think that would be a big bridge to the gap that we're trying to fix.
Sorry for the derailment.
No,
No,
I
I
was
think
writing
that's
that down.
perfect.
I like that. We were talking about a portrait of a graduate, productive citizen. I like that. Okay, so on those assessments, you can see we're not being very competitive with the other school districts. When you look at lines 23, 24, and 25. Line 25, that tells where our kids are going after they leave us, and if they are going straight to untrained employment, we get dinged. And so that's something that we have to continue to work on, and that goes to the discussions that, you know, we've been having. And that number certainly has declined. So that is definitely a metric that we have to be paying close attention to. AP score, students scoring 3 or above is at 47%. So that number has continued to improve in the St. Joe School District. And I would say, independent of where you're going, taking AP courses is an advantage to you. And whether you score that 3 or you get a B in the class, you're still going to get we get additional credit from the state, but it's rigorous, and we've seen improvements in our AP scores and teaching when we've really focused on getting teachers trained. So that is something that is a hallmark of a quality high school experience. And also we're doing pre-AP at the middle level as well. So I think that's helped us improve that, and our participation rate has really gone up in AP course taking patterns. So that's another plus. Percent of students engaged, we are at 43%. We improved this year over last year. So that was nice to see. Those numbers really went down during the pandemic. So that was an improvement. And the number of students that were hopeful has improved. So again, that was something we wanted to definitely see. Attendance, we all know that we're tracking that very carefully. If we were at the last academic services meeting, we went kind of drilled down into attendance and talked about our approaches. So we're at it right now, we're at a 77%. Our goal is to be at an 85%. So we are going to continue to try to get that improved. We're sending out postcards and thanking parents and families that have shown improved and sustained attendance. this month, we're gonna focus in on when to come to school, when, how sick is too sick, and when to return. A lot of our parents have said after the pandemic, they really don't know anymore when to keep a kid home, because it was during the pandemic, even if you sneezed, you know, they were concerned about their students coming to school. So that's an educational piece that we'll be doing. This line number 30 is from a community survey, and that is the perception of strongly agree that the community has, those participants that took the survey, of the St. Joe School District being able to prepare kids for college and careers. So that number was something that, you know, is relatively low, and something that we certainly need to work on in terms of perception there. Board of Education performance, we kind of already talked about that. I think in the past that was pre-pandemic, somewhere right at 40, so it's still relatively consistent. We used to have Patron Insights do this survey work for us, but the gentleman that owned that company passed away, unfortunately. But so we did it on our own this year, and it did save us some money. But the lovely piece about that was that he had comparative district data. So is 40 good? You know, because on its face, that you immediately go to that. But technically, that is, I mean, about where you see that metric, even in other school districts. So that's something that we can harken back to from some of those comparisons from previous times. And again, that was pre-pandemic. The number of the percent of students that they feel safe, that came from our student Gallup poll, that was 61%. And that metric actually had declined a little bit over previous years. So there's a variety of reasons for that. And then the percent of students with the best friend at school, that actually improved a little bit, and that was good to see, especially with social connections having waned during the past 2 years. And then Shannon, the percent of emergency drill completion rate, we don't have the mid-year, but we'll get that number and put that in there.
Yeah, I would say, I was just looking at that.
Yeah, I
looking
wondered.
ahead there, 'cause I knew I hadn't got that to you, but that's gonna be closer to probably 60% at this point in time. I did not report those numbers
Perfect.
before Kendra filled that in, so we're close to about the 60% range, a little over halfway through the year, so we're on track there.
And I would
That's
say
kind
this
of
is,
what you do periodically through the year.
Right, it's monthly,
So
there's,
it's
you know,
not that.
1 to 3 drills that are done every month.
yeah. And I would say the process Shannon has put in this year is completely new, and his ability to be able to really track that and emphasize that, those drill completion, I think, is really important for safety. So I just really appreciate that. The line on 35%, I've been told I do good work at school. That was right at 60%, but it didn't quite meet that mark, so we had to place ourselves at 50. And by the way, each building gets this report for their school. So each building, we get a district report, and that's what you're seeing, but each building gets a student Gallup poll report so that they can meet with their leadership teams and teachers and utilize the information to develop strategies around areas of either strength and build on their strengths, or areas for opportunity, what people call, you know, for improvement, weaknesses, and they can build on those.
Yeah, because that's sad.
Yeah.
That number is sad.
The percent that this school is a good place for me, 50%. And we're starting to use this metric in our equity and opportunity and access index scorecard. And we'll talk more about that at a future meeting. But if students feel like this isn't a good place for me, research often says, you know, they may not feel like they fit in. So we look at that through the lens of equity and inclusion. Then teachers make me feel schoolwork is important. That was at 70%. And that had improved. So that was good. Then also the percent of highly qualified staff, that's at 55%, and you can see that we're pretty low on that when we look at our comparative districts. So, and I'm sure, again, not to speak for Stacia, but she sees a lot of new teachers coming through the door, brand new teachers.
Some that are still in student teaching.
Yeah,
And some of us are coming to us not from an educational background, and they have a bachelor's degree, and we need
In
teachers.
something.
We need teachers so desperately right now that we recruit them, and then they go through an all-cert program, so.
So they go through that alternative program, right, where they get,
But they start as a teacher and go through that that typically 2-year program at the same time. So they learn as they're teaching.
And most of those programs, they have to have a job, a teaching job, to be able to be in that program, so.
Yeah.
A quick side question. I was in North Kansas City last night at their school board meeting. And one of the things that they created was the opportunity to, it seems like a pretty outside of the box idea, but you know, they haven't tried it yet, but they're about to, is paying student teachers.
We do that.
We do?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
With
Has
lots
that,
of them.
has that
If we have a
proven to be-
position open and we need that teacher there, we've offered it to student
Like,
teachers.
that's different, they're gonna pay their student teachers.
You're talking all of them.
Like compensation for doing their student
Yeah.
teaching.
With
Ours
with
is
another
for a
teacher, see,
position.
ours is a position,
Mhm.
oh, gotcha.
different,
Yeah.
different supports.
But I think that's a great recruiting tool.
It is,
That's pretty new. I mean, I've heard of a few
just happened.
districts starting to do that.
I
but
think
that-
they're increasing the amount next year too. I can't remember the specifics of the amount, but they're increasing it next year in Platte County.
Okay.
Yeah. That'd be a great thing to bring up with Dr. Kraft.
And I planned on it, but I just wanted to see what you guys think about it.
I think it would be great for recruiting.
Yeah.
yeah, because that never really, I mean, that really puts us in a tough position,
Yes.
competitively.
Yeah.
I mean, again, when you are looking at a comparison set, North Kansas City's in that comparison set, and we are at the low end of highly qualified teachers, that makes it very difficult.
And it impacts your achievement data.
Oh, yes,
it impacts it all, their community, when they see those numbers,
yes.
aren't very supportive.
And then years of experience, it remains at 12.1. So again, we're a little on the low end of that particular piece as well. Although that number seems to be awfully stubborn from the DESI perspective, I would potentially take issue with that number.
Is that teachers or all?
It's just certificated staff. And Human Resources submits that data to Core Data to submit. And then Good Place to Work, that is one item that was not on the community survey that went out that was supposed to, so we'll probably have to do a follow-up. But I think that one of if I can jump down to item number 42, the employee engagement, that is from our Q12 Gallup, or it's Gallup's Q12 employee engagement survey. So it's a very short survey, but it has a lot of reliability and it has a lot of comparative data. And so we were at a 30 last year. Now this year we're at a 37. So that is a very big gain when you look at Gallup's average this year is 32. So we felt, I think that was a very strong metric. And so I would say that helps support, that people are feeling like this is a good place to work. And and that's a huge culture and climate indicator. So we were I really stress how that's a big jump, and that's a big deal. And so that was something that we haven't seen happen. So that was really good.
I'm sorry to backtrack.
No, you're fine.
We're on 36.
42. 42, sorry.
I got caught up, I got a recorded message, 42. I wanted to talk about that. I was paying attention. I just
No, I know. You're good.
But I didn't want to skip over that. So If you don't mind, right now, we're at, employee engagement, right?
Yeah,
And
number
so,
42, yeah.
So 37 or 36 is where we're at?
Well, we're at a 37, but the way that the metrics work out, we can't place ourselves on the next square because we didn't hit 40.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so, and where were we, previously?
30,
Okay, so that is a big deal.
yeah, it is.
So
It really is a big deal.
30
And
to 37, and was that just last year, or?
that was this year. So that's,
Oh, wow, we've
that,
improved that much in within the same year?
yes. So that's a huge, that is a huge culture and climate metric. And
Yeah.
so, and that was really good to see, really good to see. People are feeling better about being in this school district.
That's
Where's the
awesome.
right guy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
Yeah.
and then,
Seriously,
yeah, that's, to me, that might be the number one benchmark, because although we talk about students, it starts with the teachers.
Yep.
And, you know, I think how this is just me talking, but I think
Yeah.
how, a part of the way we gauge how well we do is if we can retain more teachers than we did last year. And it
yeah.
looks like by this, we might be able to hopefully do that.
Yeah, because last year was 21% turnover. That's about the highest I've ever heard it. Because usually we run at 16, which is still a little high for industry, but 21% is. But again, last year was the Great Resignation and
Yeah.
all of that, so
a lot of teachers left the field.
Mhm.
yeah,
COVID had a lot to do with that too, so.
yeah.
Classroom behavior probably had a lot to do with it.
And that too, it is a tough job.
Yeah.
It
So-
is, so it's retaining these that come in early and they have a positive experience,
Right.
which is their cohorts coming alongside and encouraging them.
Mhm.
Because if they don't hear that encouragement, man, they're dead in the classroom.
Right.
Yeah.
I will tell you, Stacia and her team do a phenomenal job of meeting with them every month,
Yeah.
for new people, so that they are supported and really connected. So, it's a
That's
great
very
mentoring
valuable.
program.
It really is. And I think that they're gonna see that retention rate continue to improve with those new teacher cohorts, because it has been improving. But I think with the monthly touches with these and the really substantive PD that they get, it would appear, if I could predict, that we're gonna continue to see that segment of our staff retain.
I think too, the promise of working on an alternative school is
Yes.
beneficial to them. To think that, wow, they're really looking at that problem that we're having.
Yes.
And let's do something about it, so.
And I will say, our principals have been really good about recruiting our people that are invested in this community, people that are products of this community, people that are working for a mission and vision, more than, this is not a job, you know, this is a service. And so I'm thankful for that. So a lot of former students I had, a lot of peers that I've grown up with, and it's just, when you invest in those people and you put those people in the right seats, they're committed to the vision and mission.
Yeah.
Teaching is a calling.
Yeah.
It is. Ooh, you come
Not to go
into
long, but just one more thing. You know, I reached out to a couple teachers recently. I said, hey, I don't get the, you know, people board members with their complaints sometimes. And I said, I don't get the same complaints that I used to get. He said, well, that's because they get solved. I think that's noteworthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big deal. And we're waiting for human resources to give us the teacher attendance. That's the last line there. They were at a 4%. So as soon as we get that, we'll update that again. So, and then we'll be able to update this again sometime in March, when we get our next round of diagnostic testing. Okay, so the last thing, and I know we're getting short on time, and I'm gonna be respectful of that. If you guys remember, we talked about OnStrategy, which is a software system that we're able to, with our CSIP, that we submitted to the state, that we constructed. You guys approved that in maybe November. Then that we are continuing to monitor it. So just because it was submitted to the state and just because there was all the fanfare of getting all that done, doesn't mean that it's gone away, because we continue to track it through the lens of on strategy and getting our key performance indicators accomplished. And so we're continuing to do that. So just at a high level, we're at 76% achieved and on target. And we have lots of goals, and so we don't have anything in critical. You may see that some of them have not started yet, but some of them I just need to round back with, for example, Dr. Kraus, and talk to him about some specific things, or the finance office, and talk to them about specific things. So that's really or some things that just haven't come to fruition yet. So those things are not started for those particular reasons. And so some of the folks that own some of the goals that say not started, I'll round back with and just see where we are, and continue to work on that. Just as an example, under visionary leadership 1.4, the Board of Education will monitor the effectiveness of mission, vision, and values. That's just a survey that needs to go out to better understand how leadership is utilizing the mission, vision, and values. We started that conversation early this year. We've posted those in all buildings, and just getting a better feel of how that guides their work. Because maybe if it doesn't, what might we do to ensure that maybe it does more so, or alternatively, might we look at a different way of phrasing some of those things? So that's just an example of why something might not be started. So I just wanted to keep you guys updated to those particular pieces, and then we'll continue to work through some of this in the upcoming meetings. Next time we'll really talk about our social and emotional index and our access and opportunity index and what we're doing with that work.
One quick question. Some of these items we measure differently. So some we do surveys and some we have other ways of measuring. So for example, if we take Board of Education performance or student college and career preparation, is the survey the only way we can monitor improvement?
Not necessarily. I mean, another way that I definitely think from the lens of the Q12, the employee engagement, I think that the board can definitely own some of those pieces. Because as a guiding body and as a governance body that was really focused on culture and climate, when you see a 7% uptick in that and the decisions that you're making, those kinds of things, that's going to play into an employee engagement metric. So I would say that. And I would also say another way to look at that, just from a task list, checking things off, just from this leadership perspective of, meeting all the requirements that is set before the board, the professional development pieces that you do, the fact you're at North Kansas City, those kinds of things are also a way that we would monitor, the effectiveness of a board outside of perception. But perception is something else, and so how might you take steps to improve that perception? That's something that we would have to take steps to do from a college and career preparation aspect. If we have 22% of that sample size on that given day, so bracket that, it's not perfect, perceiving us to be a certain way, there's steps we can take to communicate more, do other things. So, potentially having Eileen help better get, the actions that you guys do and let that be more known publicly. It really is perception data. And perception data is one item.
Now, this sounds silly, but because I love attending the games and the events the schools put on. Should I wear my name tag?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
just,
think Dr.
you know, I always
McGinnis
feel
would
kind
agree.
of weird doing things like that.
Being out in the
But
public
at least
like
they know that,
that. Yeah,
because I haven't yet. But I just thought there's enough that my husband and I attend like that
yeah.
would. Okay, that's easy.
Or just doing
Oh,
little
weird.
PSAs. I mean, I know Eileen has got several slots on KQ too, even if it just features some board members about.
Yeah. But once a month I go in.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit.
So I mean, that's a way to improve. That's a way
Trying to
to.
get
Lets
Kim to
people
go.
know who you are, you know?
Yeah,
I know.
And when they see you at games, they're like, wow, she's invested.
yeah. It's that
Well, I get
visibility piece,
I get people
perception.
to come up to me and they say, I know you.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
But you
It's
know
like,
what
"Oh,
though? That's why we started doing the patron insight surveys, those kind of surveys, was because we didn't want to get caught flat-footed, not better understanding those perceptions. Because then all of a sudden you need something from the community, but
Yeah,
you haven't been asking them anything until it's time for an ask.
yeah.
So that's the intent of the perception data, is to try to continue to improve that, so that when you do need to knock on the door, there is that trust there. And really that idea came from Park Hill, because they did get caught flat-footed, where they thought that the community was really perceiving them well, and they didn't even pass something that they were asking from the community. So they were like, we're not gonna let that happen again. We won't need to better understand what they perceive of us.
Just have to be more intentional.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. What time is it? 10:10.